thank you so much to all of you for joining us here today in this citizens panel on frozen conflicts. Maybe we can just start off by introducing yourselves or ourselves. I feel like as the spontaneous host of this event, I should be so kind to introduce myself. I am Axel Müller. I'm from Germany originally, but currently based in Brussels, Belgium, and I am the project assistant with Debating Europe, which is Friends of Europe's citizens engagement platform. Friends of Europe, as you know, Brussels-based think tank. And if you agree, we can just go by first name basis. So I'm Axel, and I hope that I pronounce all your names correctly. Maybe I can just hand over right to you, Mariami. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So my name is Mariami. I am actually from Georgia, but currently I'm based in Prague since I'm the first year student at Charles University for the program of Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. Also, I'm the ambassador to the European Student Think Tank, but today I'm not representing them since I'm more here as a citizen who wants to debate in this, because I feel like since I'm from Georgia and the topic is the frozen conflicts, it's very actual and relevant theme for me. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And then I'll hand over right to Jules. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you well. My name is Jules Striffler. I am a French national currently working and living in Kosovo. At the professional level, I work for the regional NGOs, the Balkan Forum. But as the emphasis is, I am here as a citizen today. I was very much delighted when I have been proposed to take part in this event, because as everyone, I feel very concerned by what's going on in Ukraine, but also in Georgia, in Moldova. And, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jules. And it seems that you know the moderator guide better than I do, because as a matter of fact, the first question would have already been, how are you feeling about the current situation? So then maybe, Mar, when introducing yourself, I can ask you to right away touch upon that a little bit, maybe even reflecting if you share Jules' concerns or yeah, just how you're feeling at the moment.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Mar and I'm Spanish and I am 22 years old. I work at Friends of Europe, but I'm here in my quality as a citizen. And yeah, to be honest, on that question, I have been it's been difficult for me to, I guess, comprehend everything that's going on. My mind has sort of tuned off a little bit just because it seems so very, because I never thought it would happen. I never thought we would be in this situation. So yeah, it's been difficult to actually grasp the entirety of the gravity under which we are living with, on. So yeah, it's been quite distressful, to be honest, and it just sort of taken over loads of things. So yeah, that would be my general kind of feeling at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that so openly. And I have to say, personally, I can very much relate to that. I am very puzzled and somehow concerned as well. But maybe, Mariami, let me bring you in. It was not quite fair to just ask you to introduce yourself without bringing forward the first question. So what are your thoughts at the moment? How would you react?
I mean, it's a very terrifying thought to know that that's going on in the 21st century, but also I'm also stressing that since I'm Georgian, I was 5 years old when the first war happened there. Well, first war for me. So it was not that actual news for us that people struggle with all of that that's going on today. But there in Georgia, it was just several days. And now I know that it's only like 12 days in Ukraine. So that thought is even more terrifying, to know that since you're the neighbor of the big country, you have to always be at some point concerned about it. So it was not that surprising and not that sort of news, but we never actually thought that that was going to happen so fast. So I think that the thought that that is happening right now at this moment is just terrifying and should be stressing for everyone.
Yeah, that is so true. And I mean, I feel like even though several days passed by now and since the war began, and we are somehow used to always having to face new issues, things that always seem to be unprecedented. There's more word of unprecedented. Actually, a couple of years ago, I didn't even know it, to be very honest. It was not part of my vocabulary, but now it seems to be part and parcel of all the headlines. And just, yeah, like I feel it is a sort of a perma crisis maybe that we find ourselves in. We have climate change, we have the sanitary crisis with COVID, and then we have these security issues now. But I shouldn't go too far astray. And let's maybe build on what you were previously saying. So we all already said we have concerns. It is really puzzling us, and we have different approaches maybe to that topic. But how would you relate the current situation that is happening in Ukraine to the other frozen conflicts, since this is our topic today? So as you all know, frozen conflicts is like a situation in which an armed conflict has somehow ceased, you could say, so it turned from a hot conflict into a frozen conflict, and this is especially in the post-Soviet sphere something that we see a lot in Nagorno-Karabakh, in South Ossetia, places like this. But we see as well that these conflicts sometimes are not as frozen as they may be perceived, especially from the West. So maybe as a first question, do you agree on this Western common pattern of seeing the frozen conflicts, or how do you feel about this? Is it necessary to further differentiate there? Jules, what do you think?
Yeah, from my belief, I would answer very honestly, because when before the war happens, we always see the pictures of, I don't know, Anthony Blinken meeting Ursula von der Leyen, or I don't know, Putin meeting Macron, no, but the Ukrainians to speak about the very conflict we are speaking. They have been at war since 2014 with very often casualties. So I would say, from my personal belief, from the first casualty, that's no more frozen conflict. That's only a qualification you can make from the comfort of your desk when you are away from the front line. That's for the one thing. And I don't know what is frozen, because I don't know this with the Russian rhetoric behind behind the ongoing conflict. It has not been frozen. I mean, it has been existing since '92, since while the ashes of the USSR were still hot. I mean, they were already speaking of a new Russia. So I don't see really what has been frozen. So in my opinion, it is a kind of insulting to people who are on the ground experiencing this conflict. In my belief, they will not define their situation as being a frozen conflict. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mariami, how do you feel about that? Do you agree to Jules? And of course, my question was a bit provocative, or deliberately so. So, how would you react about this whole narrative of frozen conflicts, and then specifically the ones we see in the post-Soviet era? Post-Soviet region.
I I mean, there's definitely a pattern that's following, and especially in the post-Soviet countries. And since, well, my background and everything, I've always trying to do more research of why it's specifically and more happening in this regions. And mostly it leads us to the sort of two answers. And one is the imperialistic approach of Russia that sort of hinders the westernization of other countries at some point. And also another, which I don't agree with, but it's still there, is the fact that from the countries, people feel more similar to this post-Soviet nostalgic sensations. So they seem to be still sort of like together, sing together mostly. And also, to further go on that point, is that I think even though we say that those are the frozen conflicts, and I was just checking the paper from the European Parliament, which says that Abkhazia and South Ossetia are both considered as sort of frozen conflicts. And I think it's not. I mean, especially from the fact that it creates some sort of invisible obstacles which are not seen that much. But the fact is that every day there's creeping borders in Georgia that seem to continue and come further and further every day by centimeter, which seems like nothing, but for us it's too much. So even this case cannot be seen as frozen conflict, and the fact that there's an abductions or even trafficking, and even if you go closer to this occupant zone, you just maybe get imprisoned. So everything to take into the consideration just cannot be called frozen conflict, even if it's some sort of convenient for others, it's not.
Yeah, that is true. I suppose, especially when we merge this with what Jules said earlier, that kind of term as using frozen conflict as a term that only comes from people sitting at their desk,
Yes.
never the people who really experience the situation. And obviously, it is grossly oversimplified, and you might even say outright unfair if you just put all the individual cases together, all the situations on the ground, all the realities are different. But still, of course, there is a geopolitical dynamic to it. And as you know, in Debating Europe, we are always collecting questions and comments from our readers. And we actually got one comment from a reader called JTHK, at least so he or she calls himself. And he said, quote, countries at the buffer zone ought to declare neutrality like Switzerland, end of the quote. So you see, he or she is, looking at it maybe as well from this sort of desk perspective, and not really trying to put him or herself into the position of the people, be it currently in Ukraine or in the other conflict areas that we were talking about. But then, how would you react to that perception, and how maybe can we bridge this, let's say, geopolitical point of view with the realities on the ground? Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say I would first of all very much agree with what Jules and Mariami said earlier about how it's, in a way, naming these conflicts pros and conflicts is sort of normalizing the situation and like minimizing sort of the reality on the ground, as you were saying. Like the fact that they're frozen doesn't mean that they don't affect people's lives, and yeah, they've been going on for many years. And on the question, I feel like that's a bit of one of the questions I would pose to one of the experts, maybe. Because yeah, it's true that each of these conflicts comes from a different point in time, even though all of them sort of revolve around the post-Soviet, region, and have the post-Soviet kind of scenario as their origin. But yeah, with respect to this person's comments on how these countries should be a buffer zone, or like how countries on the buffer zone should be naturally neutral, I don't think that's a fair kind of observation to make, especially from this perspective of being an external observer. Because I do think countries have the right to be more than just a buffer zone country in that sense. So I don't think just because they're neighbors with Russia, that means that they cannot determine their own, I don't know, direction or their own ideological or democratic kind of tendencies.
Yeah, indeed, you're making a very important point there, with the right of each state, in fact, of each people to self-determine which stand they want to take, and this is of course a highly debated topic within the current situation that we see in Ukraine. It is one of many facets or aspects that plays into this. Maybe another one is other Eastern European countries that most of them for quite a long time are trying to look westwards to join NATO, to join EU. Some of them managed, some are in the process. They are applying, especially Western Balkan countries who are currently negotiating, but there are states as well that have not yet entered these stages, and some more than others fear that this void could be filled by other actors then, and this of course is the elephant in the room then. This is Russia that we would be talking about, and this is maybe a good opportunity to bring in a question from Liliana. And Liliana is worried, in fact, about Russia invading Moldova. So she says that there was a lot of concern recently when images of the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko were shown in front of some invasion plans, and this seemed to suggest a possible attack on Moldova. So do you think that Liliana is right with that concern, also given the current dynamics in Ukraine, that maybe this action that Putin took there could spread over to other regions, to other countries? And as a follow-up to that, how do you think the EU specifically should react to that? I'm just going to put this as an open question. Just take the floor.
Yeah, I can
Please.
try to answer. Yeah, from my belief, first, very spontaneously, two things come to my mind. First, I'm not at all an economist, so it will be very tough to me to assess as a short, mid, long-term impact of the ongoing set of the current set of economic sanctions. That's for one thing, but I really hope they will. I ideally they will be. They are so tough that they will trigger a withdrawal of Russian troops and the Syrian mercenaries they brought with them, and to back to where they come from. That's for one thing. And as for Moldova, I am very scared that since Putin feels kind of empowered because there is only the Ukrainian army fighting him on the ground. Plus, in 2014, the separatist 2014 or 15, I'm not sure anymore. 14, I think, summer 2014, the Russian separatists in Donbass took down a civilian aircraft with to the best of my knowledge, no military response. So I mean, that was, in terms of that was really not sending a good signal. So Moldova is not part of NATO, not part of the EU. We will have the decision makers will still have the same kind of dilemma and they are facing now with Ukraine. So I will. I'm very sorry if I'm kind of pessimistic, but I would say, what would be the reason Putin will not continue as continue next to Moldova? Or I'm very sorry if I'm pessimistic, but I'm just having difficulties these days to see the bright side.
Yeah, I can relate to that, and I don't think you have to feel sorry for this. Maybe Mariam, let me bring you in on this one. So let me say, I said in the beginning I am from Germany, but as you know, Germany has quite a divided history, very literally, and I am originally from the eastern part of the country. So my parents, my grandparents, even my siblings still were born in times of the GDR. Sometimes even making fun of them, saying, "Ah, you're from another country." But of course, on a serious note, I can relate to that divide that we sometimes have between the perception in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, and that's why, Mariami, I would like to ask you, since in the beginning you touched upon your experience of being based in Czechia at the moment. So yeah, how would you reply to that comment, or in general that fear of more Russian influence or Putin's influence, we could even say, in Europe?
I mean, I think we cannot call it not necessary the fear, because it's always there, especially when there's war right to our neighbors, in case for the Moldova, and same goes for the Georgia, or basically for the Eastern Europe. And as I mentioned before, when you're the sort of neighbor of Russia and such a big elephant in the room, you always have to kind of walk on the shell no matter what. And that has always been there, and that has always been ingrained in not only our mentality, but it also comes from the Russia itself. And even watching sort of this 40-minute briefing of Putin, you can just see that the fear should be there at some point, because you never know what is going to happen when the invasions are going to start at some point, because it's always so unexpected at some point. But also you can see that maybe there's some reasons that it started, but sometimes when you just listen, you feel that it was totally unnecessary, and the reasons behind are that illogical and don't make any sense to you, but at some point it makes sense to them. I think so. So fear is sort of justifiable, I can say that. And also from I think we're talking about also sanctions, and I would like to say a little bit about that. Posing the sanctions was probably, since I'm not an economist, I cannot say sort of how it's going to proceed further, but as we can see, it sort of had the sort of good outcome at some point, because people there are struggling and realizing that this is not what they want to live under, and this is not what they have been striving for. This is not democracy. This is not something they choose. So I think that from the European Parliament, or basically from any countries that has been sanctioning Russia, show not only that this actions should be condemned, but also I think that it raises awareness. And if, for example, in 2008, the sanctions were not taken, or any other things in Georgia right now, I think that it's raising even more awareness, because right back in 2008, sort of same thing happened, but the information or awareness was not raised that much. And after 13 years, the same thing has repeated. And there is a pattern sort of that no one can sort of neglect. So I feel that awareness and basically showing people that these people are afraid for their lives, not only in Ukraine, but in other countries, is the must and very necessary thing to do.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this. And Mara, let me bring you in, but I'm going to be a little bit mean and pose another comment to you to maybe spice it up a little bit, or to bring in a slightly a slightly different perspective. So we were already touching upon the question of NATO and especially EU membership of certain Eastern and Southeastern European states. And on that note, we got a comment sent in from Omar. And Omar said, quote, Georgia and Moldova are likely candidates for the EU. They will prosper from membership and the Union will benefit from having these two countries as member states. Moreover, giving Georgia EU membership could help towards resolving the conflict in the areas of Abkhazia and South Ossetia currently under Russian occupation. End of the quote. So, of course, we don't have to discuss in-depthly here this specific case, but how do you feel about this perception, and do you maybe see a change in how EU membership is currently viewed in states that we are discussing here under the umbrella term of frozen conflicts?
I would say I was actually going to bring this up, the thing about how the EU is now is going to officially consider Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia as potential accession countries. And what I would say is that it's clearly a very long process, and that cannot be denied. It would take many, many years. These are like individual countries, and of course, like conditions would be different for each of them. But like this would be a long process, but I still think it would send the right message, especially in the current situation. The right message, or perhaps, yeah, the message that the EU should be sending to Russia, the aggressor in this case. And yeah, I cannot judge if they would be good member states or not. But as I said, this would be a long process. But I do think it would be the right direction for the EU to move towards that, admitting all of the obstacles on the way and all of the time that it's going to take, but still making the effort to show this willingness to include these three countries at some point in the Union. I think would be a very strong message towards Russia of opposition beyond the sanctions that we're seeing right now. I think this would be a very symbolic thing to show.
Yeah, thank you. And you're speaking of a strong message. I think that nicely leads us over to maybe another important aspect of this question. And this is, again, geopolitically, how Europe as a common actor is perceived in the world stage. So there is much talk about what kind of world we are actually living in. Many people say it is a multipolar world, but then the question is, which are the poles? The US, Russia, China, Europe, all of them, even more. And clearly now, I think that has been echoed as well in our discussion so far. The EU sent quite strong signals, no matter if we personally agree to them or not, if we say that they were sufficient or not. But I think we can agree on that it has been unexpected that the EU would act so fast and in such a determined way, and as well certain individual member states of the EU. I'm thinking of Sweden, and I'm thinking of Belgium or of Germany, especially Sweden and Germany. They basically derailed their entire foreign and security policy in just one go. And then, of course, the question is, what will this change, this current situation in Ukraine, for Europe on the geopolitical stage? And especially, do you think this will give Europe a seat at the table at the multipolar world order? Or if you think it already had a seat there, do you think this will strengthen the position of Europe in the world now? Mariami, do you? Oh, sorry, no, Jules, you.
Excuse me. I would say in terms of.
Oh, Jules, you muted yourself. Sorry.
No, sorry. I would say in terms of European defense, I think this will boost the process, because 1 month and a half and 2 months ago, it was really a big backlash in Mali when the Danish were kicked out and the special forces task force Macron has being set up was being kind of redirected to neighboring countries. So this was not a success. But so I think in terms of EU defense, this will boost the process very fast, I think. But I see another thing which is way more disturbing because now we see a big welcoming wave for the refugees coming from Ukraine, which you can only welcome and praise, no doubt about that. But this leaves me really thoughtful about what happened 2 or 3 months ago at the border with Belarus, between Belarus and Poland, when they were building a fence with barbed wire and this really trigger very disturbing questions to which they hope we will strive for welcoming refugees independently from which conflicts they are escaping, which will be the way to make the best out of this current crisis. So that's what I wanted to raise. And now that I have the floor, I just wanted to express I was not before when you mentioned frozen conflict, when I was speaking from the comfort of your desk, it was not of your desk. You, Axel Mella, it was from French, in the French language, you said your as a one's desk. That was not directed to you.
No, don't worry, don't worry.
Personal.
No offense taken.
And also one thing I wanted to raise is that it will be. I am surely convinced the EEAS has in his department some foresight or some anticipation research department, but it will be really nice to maybe include them more in a decision making before having such awful headlines and news pictures, because right now it's completely out of for the wider audience media, that's completely out of focus. But I would say number two is Bosnia, which is also facing a very roaring process. So that was my.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it was a bit lengthy.
No need to apologize. But you're right. We are slowly nearing the end, actually, and I am really sorry that I almost have to wrap up because it is such an interesting discussion. But we shouldn't leave before giving Mar and Mariama the floor once more. So maybe let me try to combine my question about this geopolitical perception as Europe being weak, or maybe now not so weak anymore. With the points that I made before with the weapons deliveries, using the examples of Germany and Sweden, but we've received many comments on that as well. And then as a third point of view, maybe what Jules said, the refugee situation. So isn't it in a way absurd that the EU or many Western actors, Western media, you could maybe even say, are on the one hand asking for humanitarian assistance or like calling on people to donate to take in refugees, while on the other hand they promote now spending on military and delivering weapons, which one could argue is is further spurring actually a military conflict. So yeah, how would you feel about that, Marianne?
I mean, firstly, to start with, I think that Europe right now walks the tightrope between sort of military aid and becoming active belligerent, which is very hard not to fall on some sort of once and become one-sided. But also from the news and everything, like to sum up the previous questions as well, um, right now, it's two different things to talk about becoming EU member or even having the status of the EU candidate and becoming part of the NATO, since EU serves totally different, sort of have different values at some point, and it's not aimed to the military aid right now. So I think that I don't know how much chance my country right now has to have the status, but I know that it have applied, like send out the application to become at least a candidate. But as Mars mentioned, it's a very long procedure, which should have started since I'm circling back in 2008. It should have been sort of like triggering point for Europe to take the clue and realize that Russia is not stopping anytime soon. And this is the pattern that should be clear, triggering, and realize that maybe for these countries, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, we should at least consider them as the candidate of the EU. I'm not even talking about NATO, because becoming the part of NATO would be totally different message sending to Putin and sort of different trigger. So I think that's what I wanted to say. And for the refugees and everything, it's I mean, the news can be very disinformating, but not even to say about it. We see that the countries that are taking refugees mostly are the ones that are close to the borders. For example, Poland and also Czechia. But these countries are the part of the NATO, so they don't have to sort of worry anytime soon. But other countries stay low key, to say like that, and cannot even like be upfront. It's very hard not to be upfront when you have been struggling with all of that. It's very hard to keep people in line because there's protests, demonstrations every day taking place, but there's two sort of thing that's going on. Well, I'm mostly talking from Georgian point of view because I mean I know more about it, and also I think the inside is totally different than what we see from the outside, because right now world is seeing two different perspectives from Georgia. One is the people who have the spirit, they are ready for everything, they have this fear that it might happen, but also they are not fearing. And then there's a government that is trying to stay low-key, or is trying not to sort of trigger Russia and not to stop or anything, or not even putting the sanctions because they feel like it's going to be even more fragile and also triggering the war. So I can only say that from that point of view. And for the news, I think I leave it up to the others who are more like insightful of it. For example, if Mar has more information about it, possibly.
Yeah, Mar, what do you think?
What I would say on this, like whether it makes sense for the West or like for EU countries to, at the same time be like all welcome refugees, like Ukrainian refugees in this case, and then still be contributing militarily and helping out in a way, like individually from individual member states. I do think that's compatible, and I do think that makes sense because it's two different issues. You have a humanitarian crisis that you need to deal with, and in which, like, I was very surprised to see so many, like Poland, for instance, or countries like this, which have been, not that welcoming to other refugees in other times, and even now. Sort of making this effort for Ukrainian refugees. And then, like, the other thing is providing military help to the country, which I think must be noted is quite limited. So, like, the United States and like the EU have made it very clear that they're not going to implement a no-fly zone, for instance, over Ukraine, because it would be this would automatically lead to war, or like not automatically, but like it would like escalate things very much so. So I do think they're being careful with what they do on that sense, because no one wants, the Third World War to explode. But I do think it makes complete sense for these two issues to be separate, because one is human beings, the other one is, military aggression. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's absurd for the two things to coincide.
Thank you so much. And then I am afraid we're gonna have to close the session. We're running out of time, but thank you so much for this tremendously interesting panel discussion. I think we've been only able to touch on super tiny parts and give kind of glimpses of what we feel, even though we could mention a lot of aspects that are tying into the situations of frozen conflicts as such, and then inevitably the current situation in Ukraine. We've been covering a little bit the refugee issue. We've been talking about the EU or partly even NATO membership. We've been talking about the geopolitical aspect, what this means for the EU, but there would be so much more to discuss about. For now, let me just thank our viewers for tuning into this. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for our next debates. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much.